committee to come here specifically about this very important press conference. Most probably the last one this year, not before Christmas. So it's going to be addressed by none other than the party president, Honorable Patrick Oboy Amuyat, the president of the FDC. Welcome to Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you all members of the media. Thank you for coming to our home, the home of the FDC. And like my colleague has just said, we regret the late start of this meeting. We were forced to shift the meeting to midday, but unfortunately still couldn't make it here in time. I am going to address the country on a number of key issues that affect the livelihoods of common Ugandans and those with whom we associate. Countrymen and women, I greet you in the name of one Uganda, one people. The year 2022 has been a rather tough one. From the political ragtags, rugged terrain, though with some positives that we can bank on. The struggle for democracy continues nevertheless. Our beloved motherland Uganda and its nature must continue to gift us with so much of its fresh, breathing air, the bright sun, rains, which have been pertinent to the growing of food to feed the ever-growing Ugandan population, now at the level of 40 million plus. Fellow citizens, today I am privileged to address the country about key highs and lows that transpired in our political arena in the concluding year, which for certain affects every aspect of life where our democracy stands in these trying political and economic times, as the two are fist fighting for survival space instead of being complementary to each other. But firstly and sadly, I wish to recognize some of the FDC's reputable cadres and gallant Ugandans who have left us since the year began. I wish to commiserate with their families and friends, appreciating the enormous contribution they made towards the development of the nation. And you know, by now you might have learned about the demise of the Member of Parliament, Honorable Okabe, Bishop Okabe, who died in a tragic motor accident this morning together with his wife. His driver continues to fight for his life. So does his mother, who, out of shock, had to be rushed to the hospital. We also know she hasn't died yet. That's the latest information I have. And we also know of the demise of the chairman LC5 of Kedia district, who died of cancer, and many more Ugandans who have died in the course of this year. All we can say is that we report their souls to the Almighty and pray that their souls rest in eternal peace. The FDC has rather had a prosperous year as a political party, as illustrated below. In terms of elections, the use of brutal military force, intimidation, excessive money, and outright vote rigging continue to characterize our election processes, requiring deliberate building of teams to counter these negative voices. This notwithstanding, the FDC managed to field candidates in the various by-elections, which were mainly marked by violence, maintenance by the NRM regime. Contextually, these by-elections took the form of military operations, and as has happened before, fell short of being free, fair, and credible democratic processes. The elections showed the high level of impunity, adamance, and brute force the NRM regime is ready to impose on Ugandan citizens, even in the elections that followed. We as the FDC certainly are going to brace ourselves for this kind of operating environment in the subsequent by-elections, and if we get there, in the general elections of 2026. We carried out countrywide post-election evaluation, and this was very important for us, and assessment meetings with up to 95% of the country covered, with the exception of Karamoja and West Uganda, on account of insecurity and the outbreak of Ebola, respectively, being hindrances. On the national political situation, this has been a far cry dream, especially with government in power, with sheer determination to muzzle every other voice of dissent in its pursuit to retain power, while trying to portray itself or herself as a democratic and people-centered government. The FDC continues to struggle to achieve democracy and the rule of law. The country will continue, even well knowing that all the institutions of the state are fully captured by people posturing as the country's saviors. The state has always been in cohort with security machinery and an array of operatives like the RDCs, DSOs, GISOs, RISOs, name them, in the practice of jailing, beating, and shooting at political actors and the supporters whose only crime was to stand up the truth and exercise their constitutional rights as enshrined in Chapter 4 of our national constitution. I would like to make a comment at this point on what is going on between Mr. Museveni and his son General Muhoozi Kainerugaba. From the point of view of the FDC, we believe this is something that is well planned and executed to portray a fight between father and son, a fight between son-in-law and father-in-law, a fight between wife and husband. We do know that these are the kind of machinations that Mr. Museveni has always involved himself in order for him to stay perpetually in power. And so our focus is not going to be on those fights because they bring nothing to us. They mean nothing to democracy in this country. They mean nothing to the struggle against dictatorship in this country. And so our focus is going to be fighting injustice, fighting human rights, and causing once and for all the total liberation of the Ugandan people. On the national economy, in summary, all the spheres of life in our nation, have been slumping due to a couple of factors contributing to continued mismanagement of the meager resources allotted to the several sectors of our economy. And this has been an impediment to the country's development. As the economy was making a recovery from the tough times of COVID and other vices that afflicted the livelihoods of the people of Uganda, global prices of fuel shot up exponentially, and this has had a trickle-down effect on commodity prices indexes. As you are aware, the factor of transportation is very important in determining the prices of goods and services. And so, whereas the Museveni regime has used the excuse of the war between Russia and Ukraine as something that is causing a global phenomenon impacting on the prices of commodities, we believe that not enough was done by the regime. The regime has, instead of intervening, managed the crisis of fuel prices, kept a deaf ear, leaving the decision in the hands of speculative businessmen and women. And at this point, the country needs to know that as FDC, we have offered plausible solutions to the rising price of fuel, including reduction or totally removing for some time taxes that are levied on fuel. But the government in power, as you know, has caused itself to remain silent about all this, and therefore this has had an effect on the livelihood of Ugandans. We know that agriculture is the backbone to our economy, and that about 80% of our people are engaged in agricultural activities. Unfortunately, the agriculture budgetary figures are still lower compared to what it's supposed to make the realization of improvement in agriculture, including mechanization of agriculture. Today, we continue to use as a country primitive hand implements in agricultural production. The agro-industrialization takes 8th position on the budgetary priority list, clearly showing the lack of political will we get from a government to push it further. You will remember, fellow citizens, that in 2003, the AU made a resolution known as the Maputo Protocol, where our countries, and indeed the countries of Africa, committed to allocating 10% of their national budgetary resources to agricultural and rural development. This remains a far-fetched dream. Instead, we as a country have been treated with ill-financed community development programs like parish development model, which, like the others before, have turned into a gimmick intended to hoodwink Ugandans. Even if this money isn't enough really to cause real development in these communities, even the 100 million has not been given. Depending on the community that you come from, some have got 6.5 million, others have 15. I know that a maximum of up to 26 million has been given to certain parishes. And the question therefore that begs is, where is the promise given to Ugandan people, especially the rural communities, in terms of development? We notice as the FDC a very dangerous trend that Mr. Museveni and his junta have continued to use to blind the people of Uganda. Remember Bona Bakakawale. You will also recall a program called Okulembeka, and so on and so forth. We had a Myoga, and a successor to a Myoga is now the parish development model. Hot air given to Ugandans. Deception fed to Ugandans. And I think that the Ugandan population needs to stand up and begin to demand from this government that has fed them on falsehood, because they are the taxpayers that sustain this government in power. Secondly, the rather ever-expanding public expenditure is having a long-lasting toll on the budget through continued borrowing for non-priority sectors, like financing the activities of a State House where Museveni and his family live, and a huge budget in foreign travels. A lot of money is being used in different sectors, including the intelligence and the military, including buying of people from the opposition in a bid to sustain Mr. Museveni and his family in power. Today, the country's public debt stands tall and high at Uganda shillings 79 trillion, and the source of this is from a report to Parliament by a parliamentary committee, which translates to a per capita debt burden of Uganda shillings 1.8 million. So every one of you, whether you are rich or poor, young or old, including babies who are born today, are indebted to the tune of 1.8 million shillings. And yet on the flip side, you will find that the number of our people live below the poverty line. That there is a sizable number of this population of Uganda that can survive, that is able to get more than 1 meal a day. And we come from the rural areas, we operate from there, and we feel the hardship that the Ugandan people are facing. Debt financing takes the largest portion of our budget. In fact, it stands at about 58.6% of our budget. What that means, more than a half of our national budget is financed from money that does not come from Ugandans. Yet we have a revenue authority, we have all the facilities given to government to be able to collect revenue, to be able to catalyze production in this country, to put money where it profits the people of Uganda, so that they may be able to pay taxes. But as I speak now, we are a country of borrowers. We survive on others. And a country 60 years old This is certainly scandalous. It is a big shame to this country called Uganda that has been run down by people who don't love it. Now one would imagine if aid is cut to this country, if we do not have opportunity to borrow, this country would come to a standstill. And yet what is painful, as I have already observed, the money that is borrowed and carelessly spent will have to be paid by common Ugandans. I want to take this opportunity to warn those who continue to finance people who have continued to abuse the rights of Ugandan citizens, that they run the risk of their debts being referred to as odious links. Those that when Mr. Museveni is long gone will not be an obligation of the Ugandan people. And that is what the FDC stands for. Aid financing takes the largest portion of our budget. And if the government was making deliberate efforts to reduce it in the future and then tighten its grip around wasteful expenditures, this will take place soon enough before we go above the acceptable threshold of 58% debt to GDP ratio. Today we are almost at 45% debt GDP ratios. And that is trading a very dangerous path for the people of Uganda. On security, 2022 saw the restoration of high insecurity and inter-community skirmishes in Karamoja region, coupled with cattle rustling and a whole lot of human rights violation, largely by the UPDF, in the name of enforcement of the law and order within the suspects, some injured and others actually losing their lives. Karamoja turned into a death field. The FDC sent a mission to Karamoja and to the neighboring Teso to see for themselves and speak to the people and feel the suffering of the people. And our findings was that cattle rustling has been turned into a lucrative business by the UPDF and some opportunistic business persons. As FDC, a government press release in September referred to 400 deaths, while the Karamoja Development Forum counted 600 deaths between 2019 and July 2021. And this is continuing.